I want to go on living after my death. And she wrote, if God let live me, I want to work for mankind. So you see, I have a certain task.
What you just heard are the words of Otto Frank, the father of Anne Frank. His daughter's tragic story is one of the most well-known from World War II. Her famous diary became one of the most vivid records of those dark days. At the same time, it became a symbol for the youth born after the war, who found in it a source of education and a beacon of hope for the future of humanity. However, few know the incredible story behind its publication. The person who ensured the text did not fade into oblivion was Otto Frank, a man who, despite losing everything, never ceased to fight. Today, in this new episode of Military History, we will tell you about his life and his relationship with his daughter Anne. Otto Frank was born on May 12, 1889, in the city of Frankfurt, in what was then the German Empire. He grew up in a wealthy Jewish family and studied to become an economist, a career that unexpectedly proved useful in World War I. Otto enlisted in the German army in 1915, when the war had already been raging for a year and the population sensed it would last much longer. He was assigned to the Lichtmesstrupp, an artillery unit tasked with observing, from a safe distance, the location of enemy weapons to calculate where projectiles would fall. Most members of this group were mathematicians and engineers. Having studied economics, Otto had valuable arithmetic and algebra knowledge for this task. He participated in significant battles, such as those of the Somme and Cambrai, and was promoted to lieutenant for his bravery. There is an anecdote that illustrates our protagonist's personality. In 1918, when the conflict ended, troops were allowed to return home. Otto's mother waited for him for weeks, but her son did not return, so the woman sadly assumed he had died in combat. In reality, the delay was because months earlier, when the war had not yet ended, Otto's superiors ordered him to confiscate a farmer's horse to carry heavy objects. When peace came, the young lieutenant believed it would be immoral to keep the animal, so he traveled back to the farmer's house to return his horse. Only after completing his mission did he return home to reunite with his mother. In 1925, at the age of 36, he married Edith Hollander, the heiress of a prominent metallurgical businessman. The couple had two daughters, Margot and Anne, born in 1926 and 1929, respectively. Otto's relationship with his second daughter was particularly strong, as evidenced by the following excerpt from a letter he dedicated to her. With your cheerful and charming character, you always know how to gracefully navigate through all situations. I hope you always keep your cheerful laughter, which brightens our life and yours as well. They were a happy family that only wished for a peaceful life, but Germany was on the verge of entering an era of terror. Nazism was growing stronger, and violence had taken over the streets. The armed groups of the SA roamed the cities, massacring their adversaries without anyone being able to stop them. In 1933, when Hitler came to power, the Frank family decided to leave the country and seek a fresh start in the Netherlands.
We left Germany in 1933 because I didn't want to educate my children with blinkers. So we're not allowed to see Christian friends anymore.
Once in Holland, Otto worked hard to establish a spice and seasoning trading company. Just when it seemed that things were finally going to improve, the Third Reich invaded the Netherlands in May 1940, shortly after the outbreak of World War II. Hostilities toward Jews began almost immediately, with raids and clandestine arrests. The Nazis did what they did best: instill fear in people's hearts and force them to obey if they didn't want to encounter death.
Geben
Ich weiß sehr genau, 1941 war die erste Razzia, ganz in unserer Nähe. Und ich hatte Freunde dabei, junge Leute dabei. Die Leute kamen weg und nach 8 Tagen kam der Bericht des Todes. Also man wusste ganz genau, die Leute werden umgebracht.
The patriarch of the Frank family tried to relocate the family to the United States, but failed to obtain the necessary documentation to escape. Eventually, when the Americans entered the war, that option was buried. The borders of Holland closed, and it was already too late to escape. The situation was critical. German troops were hunting Jews, and Otto knew they would soon be arrested. In the spring of 1942, he set up a hiding place in an empty room in his company. There was room for his wife, his 2 daughters, and the family of Herman van Pels, one of his closest friends. From July 6 of that year, they lived in that hiding place, which was baptized as the secret annex. The company was left in the hands of Otto's trusted employees, who were willing to help him while he remained in hiding. Anne recorded in her diary the everyday life in their new home, mentioning that her father never stopped worrying about the fate of his business. Despite being in hiding, he continued to advise his employees on what to do. In his free time, he read the works of Charles Dickens and encyclopedias. This can be read in the following excerpt from Anne's diary. He doesn't like fiction, but he does like those old, boring books with descriptions of countries and people. During those years, Otto tried to maintain composure and present himself as the backbone of the group, the leader who mediated in the conflicts of daily life. This era abruptly ended in August 1944, when the Dutch police, led by SS officer Karl Silberbauer, raided the company and discovered the secret annex. The Franks had been denounced by a neighbor, although it was never known who betrayed them. Otto recalls that moment as follows.
Suddenly a man stood in front of me with his pistol and we were arrested. Les mains en haut. Avant, vite. Allez. Oui. 5 minutes.
After a few days in prison, they were transferred to a concentration camp in Westerbork, where they were separated and confined to barracks for men and women. Despite being imprisoned during the evenings, when the forced labor hours ended, Otto could briefly visit his wife and daughters. Things changed again a few weeks later when they were all loaded onto a train to be separated for the last time. The patriarch of the Frank family was trapped in that infernal place. The only thing that kept him going through the bloodiest concentration camp of the Third Reich was the hope of reuniting with his family. Later, in 1945, as Germany was about to be defeated, the Red Army of the Soviet Union liberated Auschwitz. However, Otto was not in a condition to join the communist troops as he weighed 52 kilograms and was ill, so he had to remain in the sick bay. Miraculously, he emerged from there alive and headed to Holland aboard a ship full of survivors. During the journey, he received devastating news. A woman who had shared the barracks with Edith, his wife, informed him that she had died in Auschwitz. Despite the harsh blow, Otto believed he could still see his daughters again. However, within a few months, he learned of their fate.
On m'a raconté, il y a deux jeunes filles qui étaient avec Anne et Margot à Bergen-Belsen. Et il racontait que Margot et Anne sont.
The girls had died due to illnesses and exhaustion. They left behind only Anne's diary, where she had recorded the last years of her life. At first, her father did not dare to read those pages. The pain was still too great, and he preferred not to reopen old wounds. When he finally gathered the necessary courage, he found fascinating, lively, captivating, and finely written texts. He copied some of the most emotional paragraphs and sent them to his friends and family for them to read. One of them worked in a publishing house, and suggested to Otto that he should publish the manuscript, arguing that it was a moral duty. The diary was a testimony that needed to be spread so that the horrors of World War II wouldn't be repeated. The book was published in 1947 and quickly became a bestseller. So it was translated into French, English, and German. Otto was convinced that if his daughter were alive, she would have been enormously proud, as she had always dreamed of being a writer. The following year, Otto decided to move to Switzerland, still associating the Netherlands with memories of the family he lost. In 1953, he married Elfriede Geiringer, who was also a survivor of Auschwitz. With her, he was able to rebuild his life and find a new form of happiness. In 1957, he established the Anne Frank Foundation and purchased the building where his family had hidden for 2 years. The site was reopened under the name Anne Frank House and remodeled to be a museum focused on the girl's life and the context of the persecution of Jews.
But there is an Anne Frank Foundation, Mr. Frank. What is the purpose and the aim of it?
Well, in short, I should say to fight against prejudice and discrimination, respectively hatred, against people of different race and religion.
Otto passed away in 1980 at the age of 91. Until the end of his life, he did everything possible to keep his daughter's and his family's legacy alive. Today, the foundation continues its intense work combating anti-Semitism and denialism. Anne Frank's diary is considered one of the most important literary works in history and continues to sell tens of thousands of copies per year. We have reached the end of the video. Please leave your comment in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to learn about many more military events that have left their mark on history.